From Chicago's CAN TV, this is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there and welcome to Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis. You know, we like to sit around and talk about the city that we all love to sit around and talk about. Well, today, it's a real live version of a cheesy second-rate mobster movie. A guy gets behind on his gambling debt, you know, it's $50 or so, and then he gets a visit. The guy doesn't just have the $50, so his visitor says, well, I'll come back around on Thursday and you'll have that money, or some bad things are going to start happening to you and, you know, the family. Oh, no, by the way, there's a late fee, so when you see me again, you better have a hundo in your pocket, buddy, because that's the new amount. Oh, we've all seen that movie before, and we know how it never ends very happily. But today, we're going to consider whether our own elected city government, you know, the one where the chair of the finance committee is accused of shaking down businesses to make them become his clients on his side job, whether that government is acting more and more like a mob-connected loan shark. It's not gambling debts that start the trouble, though. It's city stickers and speed cams. The city's become so addicted to those fees that they now make up, get this, 7% of the operating budget of the city of Chicago. But there's a huge cohort of Chicagoans for whom paying a $100 fine or even buying a $60 city sticker in the first place, it means cutting back on medicine or food for their kids in some cases. And as we're going to hear today, the very slippery slope from not buying a city sticker to being thousands of dollars in debt with no car, that's a reality for thousands of Chicagoans today. And I'm very proud to say that ProPublica Illinois and WBEZ have been doing some searing reporting on this accruing indebtedness to the city. And I am happy to welcome Melissa Sanchez from ProPublica Illinois. Go ProPublica Illinois. And Elliot Ramos from the aforementioned WBEZ, your digital guy there, right? Digital reporter.
Thanks for having me.
All of you guys are doing some very good work. And, you know, before we even start anything else, I just rail on here at this program about journalism. And 10 years ago when we started this show, there really were concerns that this kind of journalism was dying in Chicago. And boy, do I not feel that way today. I mean, there are so many smaller startups and independents and kind of organizations like yours and BGA that are just doing all this stuff. And then you've got legacy media that's kind of relearning how to do things in your case and others, and it's just been wonderful to see. You know, even the Sun-Times seems to be hanging in there and still doing some really good investigative stuff. But let's get started with this. In one of your recent stories, you tell the story about Sandra Botello. Is that right? I think I have her name right. She got her car sold out from under her by the city of Chicago. And I just thought maybe this would be a good place to just start. What did she do that was so vile and awful that she got this punishment?
She couldn't afford to come in compliance with the city sticker, which is for Chicago, it's a road tax. A lot of people think it's a registration fee, but it's an actual road tax for infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And I found her because Melissa got her contacted because of her bankruptcy story at first, and then so we've been getting a lot of people coming out of the woodworks, like, oh, this happened to me. Yeah. It's insane and a little overwhelming sometimes because it's hard not to empathize with some folks, but she just was explaining her situation was that she lost her car. She had been without one for a while, and she lives in on South Shore neighborhood. And she came here from Idaho, and she's really just awesome. Like she's just like this awesome super mom. And when she was telling me the story, I kind of was going back to when I was a kid, and my mom would sometimes have those tickets on the table because she was trying to do the budget. Mm-hmm. And I also remember there were times where the collectors would call, and then she would pick up the phone and drop it down again. And the thing is that that's the case for a lot of people in the city. Yeah. And if it was like they just would ding you and ding you and ding you, and so there's this sense that you don't know. It's unfair. Like it's whether or not this thing's set in place is fair or not. And I think that's kind of one of the questions that we're trying to get at.
And in her particular case, she did end up losing her car, right? The city took her car.
So if you're on the city's boot list,
and you're on the boot list after 2 or 3 unpaid tickets.
Yeah. And when you're
and those tickets can be for just something as simple as not having a city sticker, right? You can get a ticket for that?
Right. The city sticker costs between like $90 and $130 some dollars, depending on the size of your car. But the ticket for not having a city sticker is $200. You don't pay it on time, like you said with your mafia example. It doubles to $400. Then after some time, they tack on one more fee. So it's $488, and we found thousands of cases of people getting hit with 2, 3, 4 of these in a single day. So you can see how that can quickly add up if you can't afford to pay it right away.
Yeah. And these are called, so these are just they're called compliance violations, and one example would also be the license plate registration.
So these are as opposed to a moving violation, then, right? Or
yeah, I mean, we're talking
traffic violation.
And so we focused on those because it's easier for you to wrap your head around it. It's not like you got a ticket for driving badly or for parking like a jerk. It's because you did not or could not afford to pay the fee to register your vehicle in the city.
And I think one of the things that it's the imagery of a car just having ticket after ticket, because we all have seen those. We've all seen the ones that have 3, 4, 5. Some of them almost to the point where they've fallen off, and some to the point where they have, like, the cops will make their rounds, put the ticket on, and then what happens again is the meter maids will come around and put the ticket on. So it's at a certain point, like, when does it become excessive?
Yeah. So, all right, we need to sort of get some idea of what the numbers are of this. So, as you say, Melissa, that you could rack up close to $1,000 in tickets in a relatively short period of time if you have an expired city sticker on your car, right? Or if you don't have the license plate sticker or something like that. And that's just that is city law. That's happened in the last couple of years, right? That these laws have been jacked up this way.
The laws haven't changed significantly. What's changed is the cost of the tickets.
That's what I meant.
So the doubling of the fees has been the 22% collection costs. All that has been in place for a while. These types of violations have existed, but under Rahm Emanuel in 2011, they raised the cost of a lot of different kinds of fines and fees.
Now, I'm reading back your statistics to you. In 2017, just in 1 year, Chicago booted 67,000 vehicles for unpaid tickets. 67,000 cars.
Most of those were from Midway and O'Hare Airport. The city has a separate program that boots cars 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at the airport, just to catch people when they're picking up somebody from the...
But they're only booting cars because they have Chicago violations, though, right? Or are they?
They are.
So that's a lot. And I have a graphic here that I want to put up on the screen that I know, Elliot, you did this, and I think it's just, well...
My coworker Paula did it.
I'm sorry, I meant the WBEZ side did this. We have to be careful. There's a lot of people working on this, folks. But anyway, explain this to me. This we'll keep this up on the screen while we're talking. You see that roof there that just kind of goes up and up and up, that yellow part? I mean, it starts out at $1,000, and before it's, well, anyway, walk me through this.
So you have the initial ticket which is what gets the boot on the car in the first place. Then you have a boot fee of $100.
Yeah.
Then it's 24.
So this hold on, I'm sorry. This graphic starts with the morning when you walk out and see a boot on your car, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's when this kicks off.
And it's like a hypothetical of somebody accumulated a handful of tickets.
Right.
Yeah.
And they doubled.
They doubled. So once you've reached a point, a certain period of time, which is almost 2 months past that you've been determined liable for the tickets, the fines double. And at which point you're also, if it's been that long, you're also on the boot list. And so it's a $100 boot fee plus the doubling of whatever the initial ticket that was. Once you're towed...
Well, then you have 24 hours to pay all of that.
Yeah.
To get the boot off.
Once the boot's on.
Once the boot's on.
So the amount that you'd have to come up with in 24 hours could be...
It could be all of that. I mean, it could be depending on how much debt you'd accumulated. Yeah. And Chicago offers a hardship program for people who are low income, and I put that in quotes because depending on how much you've accumulated, you have to pay up to $1,000 down. There's people we've talked to. Somebody just emailed me this week with $30,000 in debt, which is crazy. But
No, that would be an outlier, but yeah. All right, so I don't know. Is this okay? Can we keep going through this day by day? I just picked out, and the graphic that's on the screen shows 8. That's highlighted just because it was kind of in the middle. But that's the 8th day, and by then already this stuff is starting to really rise.
So when the car's in the impound, you already so you couldn't afford to get the boot off, you couldn't afford to pay the initial tickets off. At that point, that's where the other mechanisms start coming into place. You have the tow fee, which is $150. Then you have on that same day, you get a $20 a day storage fee. On day number 5, it goes up to $35 a day. At which point, like, it's almost assured that the person's going to lose the car. There's very few people that are caught up in that cycle that actually get their car out and they just lose it. And when I say lose it, it's held in the impound for about 21 to 30 days, and then they sell it to a private contractor.
And then you're stuck paying, what is it, $100 for the cost of crushing the vehicle, even if the car...
You have to pay the city to crush your vehicle.
On top of everything else that we talked about, you have to pay the crushing fee, even if the city sold the car to the towing company. The towing company could have sold it at auction and made a profit. That doesn't matter.
Still have to pay for the crushing fee.
That's one of the things that really grates people when they learn that.
So, so where we're at this point then is that you started out with a ticket or two, and you've ended up in relatively short period of time where you're with your storage fees and towing fees and everything else, you're well over a couple of $1,000s. And you think that's the thing that grates me is the part that when they sell your car, you don't get to apply that money to what you owe. Yeah. Right? So you still owe everything, and you don't have a car.
And in some cases, you don't have licenses on top of that. And many of these people that have lost their car have also lost their license. So even if they were to get one, they still have a suspended license.
Now, I noticed that your stories in a couple of venues have Facebook comments, and a number of the comments are, well, the lesson I would learn from this is don't park illegally and buy a city sticker, and if you did that, you wouldn't be in this trouble. Response?
I mean, this is the response we've gotten since day one. I feel like it's pretty mixed. People are really either empathetic to folks and understand that they might be living paycheck to paycheck. I've talked to people who make $300 or $400 a week and have several kids to take care of. Or the response is what you're describing, and just this like moral judgment of why don't you just comply with the law? I comply with the law. I don't have a really good answer to that, except for, folks, it's really expensive to live here, and then when you take away people's vehicles and or driver's license and ability to get to work, to me it's like a basic math question. Like, how do you expect people to pay off their debt when you can't get to work?
Well, the way I look at it is that most of us who live in Chicago are well off enough and fortunate enough that if we got even $1,000 down this rabbit hole, we could probably cough up $1,000. And so it's a little bit easier for those folks to be judgmental about this. But
I think, like, in addition to that, so in the course of reporting the first story, I got 2 or 3 tickets. I'm not a bad driver, but I got tickets for random things, and a lot of them I didn't think were fair tickets. I fought one of them and I won, so I didn't have to pay it. It was, I think, $60 for parking something too close to a curb. I can't remember what it was. Another ticket I got a few days later for the same exact thing, and I couldn't go in to fight it because I was busy writing this story and I was so stressed out about my job. I just said, screw it, and I paid off the ticket. But like the data that we have also shown that like, who contests tickets, a lot of tickets are unlawfully issued, but white, middle class, upper class people are more likely to contest, to have jobs like mine that give me the luxury of stepping out and going downtown and fighting a ticket. And so all of this stuff kind of compounds, and I feel like the poorer you are, like just the more everything costs you.
Well, and that's obviously where I was going with that, is that there's a kind of a sliding scale down for that point at which you just kind of lose it, right? And for most people in Chicago, it's probably well over $1,000. It's many thousands, because your furnace could go out in your house, your roof, or whatever it is, and you can come up with the $10,000 some way or another. For most let's just say for lots and lots of people. But that number slides down as you go down the economic scale, and you get to a point where $500
It's impossible.
is impossible. It might as well be $20,000.
And then when Melissa's gone into the, pardon me, she's gone into the bankruptcy part of it, but then there's also your credit's ruined. You can't even lease an apartment with ruined credit. So you've taken away mobility. Yeah. You've ruined someone financially, and then you've taken away their mobility in terms of being able to just move to a different place.
Mm-hmm. And people are leaving Chicago because they can't afford to deal with this. Like I talked to somebody this week who moved to a suburb because they're afraid of keeping their car in the city because it's going to get booted, and then just to avoid it altogether, they just
it's just better to just move out. Yeah, I want to focus a little bit on this whole thing about what goes on at the auto pounds, because some of us have had our cars towed by the city of Chicago, and we've had the indignity of going to the auto pound to get it back at 2 o'clock in the morning or something. And if you've never done it, folks, you really should. It's an experience that says Chicago more than anything you can do. But what really galls me about this is that when it gets to that point that you mentioned earlier, whatever it is, 20-something days, when you no longer can redeem the car, it's going to be dealt with in one way or another. One of the ways it gets dealt with is it gets sold off. And when it gets sold off for like $200 or $300. And then the private contractor, may I say that's a private contractor? The private contractor can decide whether they want to crush it, as you said, or they want to put it up on an auction and sell it. And they're going to get a lot more at that auction than the $300 that they paid the city. Anyway,
I think the word you're looking for is, or at least the word that some have called it, is a racket.
That would be a word, yeah.
And
it's privatization is what it is.
And so this towing firm used to be called Environmental Auto Removal, and it started off with Daley when he privatized the city's towing program. And it first started off with just abandoned vehicles because it was the 80s, we had all these abandoned cars and you needed to get them off cheaply. And then they slowly, I think it was 97, they started taking over other city functions. So the winter parking ban, illegal parking, double parking in front of a hydrant, stuff like that. And so they've been growing and growing and growing to the point where now they are actually the largest towing firm in the United States because they started buying up other towing firms. They recently declared bankruptcy. And because
the towing company did?
Yeah, a funny story. They had to settle a class action lawsuit in Nevada for illegally towing cars, and then to avoid paying the $5 million payout, they declared bankruptcy and then got bought by the majority stakeholder, which is an investment firm in New York. That said,
so my car is being towed by some investment firm in New York.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, they're also profiting off of these sale of these vehicles. So, like in 2017, there were about 8,000 cars that were for scofflaws, which is the word that they use for people who don't pay debts. But they actually sold closer to 24,000 cars in that year. And that's not an outlier. That's about, on average, it's actually kind of low because it used to be much higher in previous years. And the cars usually are all under $200. So,
and it's like the scrap metal price of the weight of the vehicle, right?
Yeah, and so the way that the city wrote this contract, which is really, really funny because there's no safeguards built into this, no oversight built in this, is that they just transfer wholesale the assets of these cars as if they're all junkers. I went into the towing data and got the VINs all decoded, which is that says like what the make, year, and model of it, and then some of these were from 2015, 2013, 2012. Any used car dealer will tell you that most of these cars are worth thousands of dollars. Now, because of the way that they're transferred, the city doesn't actually retitle them. They get a salvage title on them and then a rebuilt title, which the city's like, well, then it means it's not worth that much. I'm like, you're still driving a BMW. Like, it's still a newer car.
So you could sell off a BMW by what it weighs, is what you're telling me?
About all the cars are, so if if it's a bigger car, its scrap value is like maybe $50 or $100 more.
Oh, well, that's good to know. Yeah.
But that's like, you're talking like a trailer, which some of those do get impounded, and like an RV and something, but most cars are in a range of $150 to $200 that they sell them off.
And you said that there's supposed to be some mechanism where the city gets more money if they get sold at auction at a certain dollar amount.
The only oversight mechanism built into this contract is that if after we sell the cars to this towing company, if any of them get more than $10,000 at the auction, they have to notify the city, hey, this car that you already sold us is worth this much.
And has that ever happened?
It has happened like a dozen times or so. and the city,
well, at least there's honesty.
And then the city will have the option to ask for the car back so they can sell it. A lot of times people confuse this with asset forfeiture. The asset forfeiture system in Chicago is alive and well, but there was about 735 cars that actually were caught in asset forfeiture in 2017.
That's where the city impounds a vehicle because it was used in a drug purchase or something?
Any kind of crime.
So it was involved in crime.
So the towing program is bigger than just the ticket debt stuff. Mm-hmm. They have a whole series of crime-related tows.
They call them VIP tows.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
It's a vehicle impoundment program. And it's for, you can get your car impounded for loud music. You can get your car impounded for littering. You can get your car impounded. The way that it was originally cast was like firearms or like drugs and stuff like that. But the vast majority of the people that were caught in this were having suspended licenses. And the vast majority of those people got their license suspended because of ticket debt.
And then it's also like DUIs, and then like if you get pulled over because you're black, and the cop walks by and sees that, or he smells marijuana. I've seen this in court, like people who got pulled over for no reason except for having their lights on in the middle of the day, and then their beautiful, nice car gets impounded, and they get charged the $1,000 VIP fee in addition to everything in that chart you saw earlier.
Mm-hmm. I happened to be able to be home during some of the Jason Van Dyke hearings, and I was watching on the day when some of the people who claimed themselves to be his victims were testifying. And there was one in particular, the guy who had just really riveting testimony about being dragged out of his car on his face, basically, and all the indignities that he claims he went through. And then they asked him, well, what happened to your car? And he said, I don't know, I never saw it again. It was just towed away, I never saw it again. So I guess that's
a VIP.
That's a VIP. But nevertheless, the point for my raising this is that somebody somewhere, whether it's those investors in New York, maybe they're the same people who also own our parking meters, I don't know, but those investors in New York are making a lot of money selling these cars off to auction.
Yeah.
And that just, I don't know, somehow that just feels unfair to me. I just don't understand it. I mean, it's your car. It was your car until the city took it away from you.
And there's all sorts of implications around just due process and the seizure of property. Mm-hmm. I think that because it's labeled blank, a lot of people caught up in these crime-related tows are never charged with crimes, particularly around the ticket debt with the license suspensions and marijuana offenses. The state attorney won't actually press charges, but they're liable. Most people don't know that there's an additional, so when you get caught up in these particular types of tows, you pay the impound fee, the storage fee at that point is $35 a day, and those guys, they don't have a cap at 30 days and they lose the car. Some of those go on for months, so I've encountered individuals with $10,000 or $12,000 in storage fees.
Really?
Yeah.
Welcome to Chicago, ladies and gentlemen. This is Chicago Newsroom, where we talk about the great city that we love to sit around and talk about. This is mind-blowing because, you know, the weirdest part about it is that nothing in any of your reports was really shocking to me. It's like, oh yeah, I kind of figured something like this was going on, but I'd never seen it laid out in one place like this, and it's really just amazing. In 2017, we said 67,000 vehicles were picked up for unpaid tickets. A third of those cars went to the pound. Of those 20,000 that went to the pound, 8,000 were sold off. 50,000 cars owned by Chicagoans have been sold since 2011. And sold by weight, apparently, I'm learning this morning, for a couple $100 each.
That was just the scofflaws.
Right.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It's because it's probably, so I'm literally going to City Hall after this to pick up more records, but the the number is probably closer to 150,000 when you include the crime-related tows.
Wow. So, getting back more to the central, what I consider to be the central issue here, which is that some people can't pay things. I was really interested to learn that 1 in 3 sticker tickets never gets paid. So,
I think it's 1 in 3 tickets get paid, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's even
Ever gets
worse.
paid, not
Yeah.
never gets
Right.
paid. Only 1 in 3 sticker tickets ever gets paid. I'm sorry. Yeah. So this is people who are making a decision that they know that there's some risk in not paying this, but they also know there's some risk in not paying for other things that the family needs. So they make a judgment call and they say, forget the city sticker. I'll try my best to evade the cops or something, right? That's how that works. But still, that's a pretty amazing number. 2/3 of the tickets that are issued never get paid. But that was true before all of this draconian stuff started, right?
Yes, and so one of the points that we were trying to make with that is the ticket is really expensive. It's expensive now at $200, and then with late penalties, that's $488. But it was expensive before at $120. It's one of the most expensive tickets on the books. So people think that we're talking about parking tickets and like just stop parking like a jerk. But those tickets are $60. Or they're tickets that are issued more in white Chicago and in neighborhoods that are more congested where there's more business. And these tickets are 3 times, 4 times more expensive, and they're issued more in black Chicago. And I bring up race because it's so tied to class in the city, and also it's related to police because a disproportionate share of those kinds of tickets are issued by cops. And Elliot mentioned meter maids. There's 3 different entities, big entities that issue tickets: the cops, the meter maids that are paid for, that are city employees, and private workers who are also meter maids. And the city workers and the private workers operate more in white and Latino Chicago. And the police, because there's more police in low income, heavily, more violent, more crime neighborhoods that are black, they're just there more often. And so you have like a higher police per capita. And I don't know if they just don't have anything else to do, but they're just issuing ticket after ticket after ticket in neighborhoods like Englewood and North Lawndale. And so people are just being accosted by police with tickets. A lot of them are renters. They don't have access to garages. They can't hide their cars like you and I can hide our cars in our garages. And so they're more exposed to this. And so yeah, 1/3 of the tickets aren't paid, in part because they're more expensive, but also because they're being issued more to people who can't afford to pay.
Well, but the reason for raising this is that this phenomenon was going on a long time ago. I mean, it's been that way for years, that many of these tickets just don't get paid. So the city's response was, let's just crunch them harder.
I think the city maybe didn't know what the consequences were or didn't care. We asked them for projections for what work did you do before raising the cost from 120 to 200? Did you see how much money it would bring in? Did you look at the payment rates? Did you see what the consequences were for the people who were getting the tickets? And we got nothing back. They did nothing. They did no work to study either the effects on their own coffers or on pocketbooks of people in Chicago.
You report that they didn't even run revenue projections.
They did nothing.
So a company, or actually the Inspector General also issued a report in June that said that the city did not evaluate fees before raising them. Like
All kinds of fees.
Yeah, all kinds of fees. User fees, which are like any kind of like permits or stuff like that. They just arbitrarily raise them. Like, okay, we'll get more money.
What's crazy to me is like the city's a really big monster with a lot of different departments, and some parts of the city knew what was going on. The city's law department has a guy they hired to deal with bankruptcies because when you're right, these tickets never have gotten paid, but the situation got a lot worse because the debt got bigger. The debt just exploded after 2011, and what that's meant is thousands of people are going into bankruptcy each year because that's one mechanism they have to deal with this. Mechanism helps them get their cars out of the impound. It helps them get their licenses back, and in the law department they hire hired a guy to deal with this. And and what do I mean by deal with it? They hired a guy to figure out some way to keep people from filing for bankruptcy so the city could get money. And so the city has to, like, they get notices of 10,000 bankruptcies filed last year to deal with tickets. And so somebody knows that this is a problem, but their response hasn't been, how do we like adjust our policies so people aren't going into debt over parking tickets? Instead, their solution is, how do we figure out some new legal tactic to keep people from stiffing us? This is kind of how they see it.
You know, we've been doing the show for a long time, and when Rahm Emanuel came into office, he appeared at the City Club of Chicago with all of his PowerPoints and talking about the $650 million structural deficit that he inherited, and I believe him, I'm sure he did. And my recollection is that the city was on red alert panic 8 years ago. It really looked like the ship was sinking, and there was need for every kind of revenue possible. And an interesting political thing that happens is that there's also a new city clerk, Susana Mendoza, who we now know. And Susana Mendoza, you quote her as saying, offering up, in quotes, if we were to increase that fee to, say, $200, that would give you $16 million there without having to ask a single person who is in compliance today to give us more. Let's go after those folks. Now, that quote is attributed to Susana Mendoza. I think today she would say that she didn't know what she was talking about, or something. I don't know what she would say if she was confronted with that today. But that's what was happening, was all of the officers of the city were being told, come up with something, come up with ideas for raising money. And she threw $16 million on the table, except for the one problem being that it never did raise the $16 million.
It didn't raise the money, and I mean, I think we can understand where they were coming from. Like, Rahm inherited a mess. It wasn't his fault, and he was looking for ways to solve the problem. But at some point, when you come up with a solution, maybe it brought in the money, maybe it didn't. But when you see what the other consequences are, I think, like, a good steward maybe would rethink that policy. Like, I can't claim to have like a solution for how the city fixes its problems, but it's probably not a way that ends up sending people into bankruptcy.
And one of the unfortunate, it wasn't just like, he raised a lot of different fees. My colleague today, she published a story on water shutoffs, and it's the same neighborhoods we're seeing that were affected by Inglewood, Lawndale, like all this, we're seeing the same stuff, but also the same neighborhoods that are losing the population. At some point or another, someone's going to start connecting the dots that like the city may have had a role in creating abject poverty.
I find that really interesting because that is one of the big topics right now, right? Everybody is just pulling out their hair and saying, why are so many people leaving Chicago? And particularly, why are so many poor and African-American people leaving Chicago?
They should ask them.
Yeah, they might find that a lot of it has to do with the way we're just squeezing people who don't have any money, instead of trying to be more proactive about helping improve the situation. I don't know. You mentioned that, and I mentioned in the introduction, that we've got to the point now where the fees from these tickets comprise 7% of the operating budget. And we've had, mayoral candidates on the show who have said, and I think Paul Vallis was one of them, that for the most part, the tax fees that come in for the city, they just go straight to retiring debt and pensions and stuff like that. They don't operate the city at all. The city is operating on these kind of tenuous.
It's actually a little bit more. The vehicle impound fees and the car sales are tucked under the vehicle tax. So they don't even include them in the fines, fees, and forfeitures as part of the budget. Okay. So it's even more than that.
Yeah. So a few millions more, or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that I really wanted to get at, though, is this idea that something that has really impacted a lot of people, thousands of people, was a kind of a short, quick decision made by some policymakers at the city who were told by someone who was new in the office and didn't really know what she was talking about, that, oh, you can get $16 million out of this. And $16 million wasn't much. They were looking for $600 million, but I think they made some mistakes here. I wanted to bring up this issue of you have said repeatedly in your reporting and some of your headlines that these policies have disproportionately affected African Americans in Chicago. And my immediate knee-jerk response to that is, oh, don't bring race into this. This is affecting people who just can't afford to do this. But you've done some very interesting work with maps, and you've gone further down the road into this, and I think it is possible to say that African Americans have been affected more acutely by these policies than other Chicagoans.
I mean, we look at the bankruptcy data. We map out where everybody lives by census tract, and that's where we come up with these determinations. Mm-hmm. And it's because of where ticketing takes place, and it's because, like, you know, we know poverty and race are so tied together in this city. And the way debt accumulates, like, you get a ticket, you can pay it, and you only pay that underlying $200 cost. And if you're poor, and if in Chicago poverty and race are so closely together, like, mm-hmm. you're going to pay more, and so mm-hmm. it just exacerbates the problem.
And we haven't even gotten into the entry into these things, be it ticketing or be it towing or these vehicle impounds. We haven't even gotten to, like, what is sort of the unanswered, the elephant in the room is, like, were the tickets and were the stops when people get pulled over, were they justified? We haven't even scratched that or even gotten into that, because that's going to say a lot. I was hanging out at the impound lot talking to people. One guy shows me that he tells me that he got arrested, pulled over, he's trying to get his car back. He had to take an Uber to another place and then from another place because they wouldn't give him a straight answer. But he shows me all the tickets that they gave him. He had 5 tickets of the same violation for something to the effect of, like, not having a license or a valid license, but they were 5 different tickets for the same violation. And he shows me it, and I write down the ticket number so I can look them up later, but I'm like, you can't get 5 tickets for one violation in one sitting. You can't, you're not allowed. Mm-hmm. But he did, he showed them to me, the carbon copies.
So if he went to an administrative hearing, they would throw that out, wouldn't they?
They usually do.
But that's the other thing too, is that it's become the administrative hearing has become sort of a place where people have to go. The onus is on them to prove right. stuff, and also it's a privatized quasi-judicial system. Mm-hmm. It's not even like traffic court.
Right. It's not a court.
And I've been there. And, like, Latinos don't appeal, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why that's happening. I've been at the administrative hearings place. And with, like, I remember talking to a Mexican woman. I had to, like, be her translator. It's not my job. I'm a reporter, but she couldn't communicate with people about what was going on. People don't have access to the internet. They can't go online necessarily and appeal via the internet. Like, I could probably do it on my phone, mm-hmm. but my mom can't. Mm-hmm. My dad can't speak English. Like, mm-hmm. how would he go defend himself in court? So there's all sorts of ways that the system is just set up to not help everybody.
And people get that message quickly.
Yeah.
And it goes out on the wire. There's no point in going
like,
down there,
bother?
And you'd lose a day of work.
Exactly.
Or there's been some instances where the cops, when they would still write paper tickets, and one of the things that they sometimes do is they turn in the ticket book a little bit later, so somebody might go online, try to pay the ticket, but it shows up, it's not in there because it's not registered in the system yet.
So it's harder to pay.
Or they might actually think it was, oh, okay, I don't get the ticket, so left it alone, and then they get another one in the mail saying, hey.
Really?
Yeah, it's a really, a lot of different, IBM has a $200 million contract with the city to take these ticket books and scan them and do whatever with them, but it's the city likes to think that it's this perfect little system that works all the time, and it doesn't.
Wow. You know, I got one of those automated parking things, and I had that same experience. I thought, I've got to get this done before I forget, so I went right to the old terminal and looked, and it's not there. And for about 2 days later, I kept looking, and it wasn't there. And I'm starting to think, well, maybe it didn't happen. You know, maybe they just didn't record it or something. But sure enough, later on, it did show up. But it took days before it actually showed up in the system.
And sometimes it doesn't show up until, the late penalties have accrued. And there's thousands of tickets that happens with every year. There's a million stories we could write about this. Like, the technology isn't there.
Wow.
The notification system doesn't work, and you don't always get notified before your license gets suspended, before your car's on the boot list.
But we pay $200 million to IBM to handle the whole thing. We pay $60 million to the towing company. We pay $7 million or $6 million to the private meter maids, the LAZ folks you see with the yellow vests. And then there's all the debt collectors.
Wait, we pay the people who I didn't know that. That's something new I just learned. We pay the meter people who go around ticketing at the LAZ, at the LAZ parking meters?
Yeah, they're private.
I know how much money they get for running this service.
There's two sets of private meter maids. They're the ones that we pay.
Yeah.
And then there's the ones that they pay.
Okay, all right, okay.
But we pay. But in either case, we get the ticket dollars. Yeah. But the LAZ has the incentive to pay for their own meter maids because
of course they do.
They want to get the meter money.
Right, they get more money if they do. In 2007, an estimated 1,000 Chapter 13 bankruptcies included debts to the city. Okay, we'll get that now. That was in 2007, a long time ago. It was 1,000. These were usually for unpaid tickets, with the median amount claimed around $1,500 per case. I'm quoting them. By last year, the number of cases had gone from 1,000 to 10,000, the typical debt being around 3,900 as opposed to 1,500 a decade before. Though the numbers of tickets issued did not rise during that time, the city increased the cost of fines, expanded its traffic camera program, and sought more license suspensions. So they get you either way.
They get you either way.
And we haven't even really discussed Mayor Emanuel's beneficence in putting these cameras up to protect the children. And I know you guys like to, complain and whine about all the things that have gone wrong. You haven't reported on the thousands of children whose lives have been saved by these speed cameras.
Next story.
No, that'll be your next story. Okay. Well, we really could go on, but I think we kind of get the point here. I mean, it's funny. It's like I've read all of your stuff, and yet there's still things I didn't know that I didn't. That really ticks me off about having to pay the people to come and put tickets on your car.
Somebody's getting paid somewhere.
It's important to say something good about this, though. And this is a person of privilege point of view, but the parking meters really have made life a lot easier in a lot of ways. I mean, the app is really reliable. It's really good, and there's turnover because people can't stay. They can't claim the meter all day long. So there have been improvements, and I will say that the meters work all the time. They're well maintained, as they should be for the billions and billions and billions of dollars they're being paid. So that's the good side of privatization, I guess. We just wanted to say something good about privatization. We never do on this show. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
What have we forgotten? Do we have anything else we have to stick in here?
All the mayoral candidates say they're going to fix it.
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, I have that right here. All 14 candidates have said they want ticketing and debt reform.
That's great news, huh?
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, if only it were true. We'll see, won't we? Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll have Mayor Daley on in about 6 months, and we'll ask him how he's doing on ticket reform. How's that? Okay. You have been watching Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis, and I really want to thank Elliot Ramos and Melissa Sanchez for being here. Melissa is with ProPublica Illinois. Elliot Ramos is digital reporter for WBEZ, Chicago Public Media, and they're doing some fantastic work. And if you haven't seen it yet, just what's a good term to Google to get you into the thing?
Chicago tickets bankruptcy.
Or driven to debt, I think.
Driven to debt. That's a good headline. Google driven to debt. You won't believe it. You'll be up all night reading all these stories. We're back next week with our mayoral preview with a bunch of journalists sitting around the table. But I think it's not necessary. We all know Bill Daley's going to win now, don't we? We've already heard. The Tribune has endorsed him. What else could there be? We'll see you next week. Don't forget, you can go right here to see all of our previous programs, and you can also see all of our hour-long mayoral conversations. It's kind of interesting. Hope you'll do that. See you next week. Thanks. Bye.